If you live in the UK and fly a drone, then you're going to want to pay attention to what I'm going to say in this video, because the CAA, or the Civil Aviation Authority, have just announced that they are looking to review the category system we have in the UK, which of course is going to affect possibly where you can fly your drone. So in this video, I'm going to show you basically what they are potentially looking at changing, what they will be reviewing, and most importantly, how you can get involved to potentially have your input, okay, to make sure that hopefully these new drone regulations within the UK go the way that is suitable for all of us. So let's get into it. So the CAA have announced that they have asked for a call for input from you, the UAS operators within the UK. Basically, they are looking to simplify and possibly rename the existing drone categories whilst ensuring safety, security and user friendliness. Now, this is potentially huge because from some of the documentation I've been reading, they are possibly looking at where you can fly, whether the sub 249 gram category is actually still appropriate for where you are flying, and looking at basically simplifying the categories and even possibly completely renaming them. Now, many of you will be fully aware that at the end of 2022, the CAA here in the UK made a last minute 11th hour decision not to follow the EASA rulings on the C labelled drones. This was incredibly frustrating for many of you, including myself, which I just recently purchased the DJI Mavic 3 Classic to be able to do tests in a urban environment, and that was quickly taken away from me, except for a period of around 10 days. So essentially in the UK, we reverted back to what was currently in place with the existing separational distances, whereas our friends over in the EU, or indeed the US, do have much greater freedoms at where you can fly this drone. Now, this is a little personal point from my point of view, because I understand all of this is generally about kinetic energy, and should the drone fall out of the sky, then I fully agree that bigger drones are going to potentially cause more damage. But in my personal experience, I've always found that bigger drones such as the DJI Mavic 3 Classic, the new Air 3, because they have omnidirectional obstacle avoidance sensors, which are very, very good, especially circumstances where you wouldn't even think they'd be good and able to work. These things are capable of avoiding obstacles, and for me, it's from my point of view, that makes these drones incredibly safe. I do understand that a sub 249 gram drone falling out of the sky is not going to hurt quite as much as a 900 gram one, but essentially when it comes to the potential opening of accidents and risks, etc., for me, the bigger drones that are less likely to get blown about by the wind, that have got obstacle avoidance, etc., etc., I personally do think the bigger drones are even safer than, of course, the small ones that your average user can just buy from Argos and zip round a crowded area. Whereas obviously with a bigger drone, if you've got your obstacle avoidance turned on, that is very unlikely to hit anybody. So here in the UK, we are currently operating from 3 categories. We of course have got the open, which is the majority of what most of you will be flying in. We have got the specific category, and of course we've got the certified category. Now, it does look like, by reading the documentation coming out of the CAA, they are looking to potentially review not only the names, but basically a general overview. Now, from my own personal feeling, I think the drone regulations right now are quite complex. Not for me, I do understand them, but more importantly, if you do not know anything about drones and you are just picking up your first drone for the first time and you're popping down to your local retailer in the UK, your Argos, your Currys, there's nothing to tell you that where you can fly, essentially, okay? And I think this whole thing needs a review so we can get more awareness out there, so those of you that are not part of the hobby, that are just somebody that will just buy a drone just for a little mess about with the kids in the garden, are made aware of exactly where they can fly at all times. And of course, I also do actually call, believe it or not, some of those longer term viewers of my channel might find it slightly ironic, but I want a specific defined limit on visual line of sight, okay? Because many people say visual line of sight is 500 meters. Some people say that visual line of sight is as far as you can see it based on its orientation, which of course the CAA have also mentioned. But of course that is going to be different for everybody, and essentially I want to try and get away from what we see on social media, such as the drone police, if you wish, constantly shooting down everybody's work saying you have visual line of sight. What I would prefer is to have a hard limit, if I'm perfectly honest with you. Might not prove popular, but at least least it will solve the problem. And just like we have a hard limit on the actual altitude, we know we cannot fly over 120 meters, and I think a similar sort of thing should be introduced if you are going to introduce it. My own personal thoughts are drones are safe beyond visual line of sight. I think many of you know that I do share that view, as much as I do not actually encourage it, because from my point of view, you know, if I'm flying a drone out to sea 1-2 kilometers, there's absolutely zero that I can hit because I'm just flying out to sea. I think the flight should be risk based. Of course, if you are flying in an urban area, I think those distances should be brought down. But of course, you know, if you are flying over a mountain range, and like I've already mentioned, if there's nothing to hit, why can't you fly beyond visual line of sight if you've got a drone? As long as you can see the area with which it's flying, and you know there's no aircraft, no helicopters or anything like that, they do not just drop out the sky. So I think that is worth exploring. As you can see, the CAA themselves is exploring ways to simplify the current categories. Basically a streamlined system that's easier to grasp, especially for newcomers to the drone scene. Now, I'm sure you all agree that safety and security is absolutely paramount. At the end of the day, a safe flight is a good flight, and it seems the CAA are committed to mitigating risks by looking at this review and ensuring everybody's safety on the ground and of course in the air. And then of course, what does it mean for you? Well, it might well be that obviously for new drone pilots and seasoned ones as well, that these rules are just so much more simplified. There's no more grey areas. Like I say, just reverting back to what I've currently said, the biggest grey area for me is how far you can fly. Visual line of sight, what does that mean to you? At the end of the day, my eyesight might be better than yours. I might be able to fly further than what you can. Yes, it's important to keep your drone in visual line of sight, but I would always prefer that to be a specific distance so everybody knew what they was working with. And also, obviously, there is a lot of misinformation as to where people fly their drones. Of course, people do just go to Argos, they buy the Air 3, for example, and they think they can fly it in a built-up area, okay? Whereas, obviously, hopefully, that these rules will allow more people to know when and where they can fly in a much more efficient fashion. Now, this one is absolutely huge and requires absolutely all of you to hit the link in the video description and take part in this call for input to get your point across, because I have seen there is going to be a review on the sub 249 gram drones, and basically reviewing whether it's still appropriate to allow them the leniency that we currently enjoy. If you're already aware, any drone under 249 grams, you can basically fly it pretty much wherever you want, apart from over a crowd. And this is potentially not necessarily for the negative, but it's going to be looked at to say, well, is this still something that we agree with? Is this still something that we should continue with? And this is vitally important because the majority of you that are going to be watching this video will have a drone in that category. So at the very least, for me, it's hugely important to make sure we can still keep those freedoms. So what I'm asking you to do is please make sure that you make your voices heard and be part of this call for input implemented by the CAA. It is vitally important we fight for the freedoms we currently have, and most importantly, it would be nice because there is a question in there regarding aligning ourselves with our international partners. So this could potentially mean EASA, meaning we could potentially fly the C-labeled drones in the same airspace with which EASA nations enjoy. Hugely advantageous to many of you, especially those of you with the slightly bigger drones as well. And I personally think they're pretty safe, as we've already discussed earlier on in the video. So I will leave a link to the document the CAA have published in the video description, and we'll also leave a link in the video description below which takes you straight to the input page so you can go and make your voice heard. So if you did find this video useful, please do give it a big thumbs up. It tells the YouTube algorithm that more people just like you might want to watch this video. If you're not already, please do hit that bell notification and subscribe to the channel if you're awesome. And until next time, thank you very much for watching. See you again soon.